you guys. Flickers of Fear time once again, where I attempt to get through my whole huge list of unseen and unreviewed horror movies. It's going to take me like the rest of my life. But, it's an enjoyable journey, so we're here for it. So this one that I want to talk about today, I kind of really wanted to highlight this one because I feel like this one doesn't get mentioned a lot, even though it's pretty awesome. And I actually didn't even hear about it when it first came out. It came out back in 2012, and it's called Excision. Now, this is one of those movies, and I think I brought this up on this show before, that periodically I will kind of go through, I'll go to different horror blogs and different sites, and I'll look at their lists of, best underseen movies, movies you haven't heard about, blah, 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 from like the last 20 years or what have you, so I can kind of get an idea of the shit that I'm missing out on. So this movie turned up on a couple lists like that. So I wrote it down, noted it, and then probably about, I think I first watched it like maybe 2 or 3 years ago, because I noticed that Tubi had it for free. And as far as I know, it's still on there for free, so if you want to watch it on there with a couple of ads, you can. It's also on Amazon Prime. If you're a subscriber, you can watch it for free as well. The weird thing about it is that when I went to watch it, because I said, well, I guess I'll watch it on Amazon Prime, so I don't, have to watch the ads on Tubi or whatever. But Amazon Prime has 2 versions of it. One that's like $1.99 or $2.99 to rent, and then one that's free with subscription. But as far as I can tell, they're both the same. So don't feel like, because for at first I kind of thought, oh well, maybe the one you pay for is like director's cut or has scenes that were cut out or whatever. But it's exactly the same movie, and it's exactly the same length. It's 1 hour and 21 minutes. So like I said, if you have Amazon Prime, then you can watch it on there for free. So as I said, this is one that kept coming up on a lot of lists, and it sounded like pretty cool. Like it sounded like right up my alley. Is it a horror movie? Yeah, but it's kind of like more a really fucked up black comedy, sort of. Like it's funny, but it's also kind of like, but it also has elements of tragedy, I guess, but that's like more toward the end. During most of its runtime, it's just this really kind of uncomfortably funny, twisted, kind of sort of gross type of movie. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's actually, I loved this movie actually, and I watched it a second time like for this review, and I enjoyed it just as much this time. It's so good, and I just feel like I don't see a lot of people talking about it. And like I said, like with most horror movies, it's not for everybody. This one's pretty disgusting. Like it goes into, and especially if you're squicked out by like menstrual type of stuff, you might be grossed out. But it's like, it's really, really bloody. There's a lot of organs, like a lot of stuff about surgery and stuff like that. So, I've seen this compared actually to May, which I talked about a couple weeks back. I've also seen it compared to American Mary. So if you liked those 2 movies, and I can kind of see where that comparison is coming from. So if you like those 2 movies, you probably would dig this one as well. So the writer-director of this was a guy named Richard Bates Jr., and I guess that he had made Excision as a short film back in 2008, and then, as usually happens, like it gets a lot of, it kind of gets a lot of attention, and then they expand it to feature length. So 2012, it premiered at Sundance, and seemed like it got a little bit of buzz, at least at the time. Like I said, it seems like one that, I don't know if it's necessarily been forgotten about. It's one that I kind of feel like doesn't, like I said, even when people are talking about underrated movies, I feel like it's one that doesn't get brought up much. The same writer-director also made a movie called Suburban Gothic, which came out in 2014, which is also really, really good. More of, like I said, more of a dark comedy. I don't remember it being quite as gory or as bloody or as gross as this one, although it's been a while since I've seen it. I think that one's also on Tubi. And he made one in 2016 called Trashfire, which I haven't seen yet, but I've heard like a lot of good things about it. So I've added that to my list as well, as if my list wasn't long enough. Now, the interesting thing about this one, well, there's a lot of interesting things about this one. One, there is a fuck ton of, I hesitate to call them cameos because I kind of feel like I'm going to say the word cameo, like celebrity cameo. Usually that just means, hey, I'm going to show up for 5 seconds or whatever. There's a lot of like what you would call celebrity cameos in this, but they mostly have like 2 or 3 scenes. So it's not like they're just popping up for 5 seconds going like, hey, look, it's me. You know what I mean? It's not that kind of thing. They are actually like characters. And interestingly, one of the main parts in this is played by Traci Lords. And Traci Lords is kind of playing, I guess you could say she's playing like against type in this, because she's playing like this really uptight, kind of very conservative Southern mother who's trying to keep her like family together, and she's great in this. I mean, you wouldn't think, because that's, like I said, that's not normally the type of role she plays, but I mean, this I think this is the best thing that I've seen her in, like acting wise. She is just really, really good in this. Now, interestingly too, I was gonna say about all the cameos, or listen to this, you guys. So Traci Lords, I don't call that a cameo because she's like a main character, but the sort of cameo, they're only in 2 or 3 scenes. You got Malcolm McDowell playing a math teacher. You got Marlee Matlin, who is playing, is she like a guidance counselor or some kind of camp? She's somewhere that like works at the school or whatever. Ray Wise, who plays the principal of the high school, and John fucking Waters. John Waters is in this as a priest. So already you can see. So like I said, that cast should kind of give you an idea of the sort of vibe this movie is. Like I said, this is a very weird, it almost kind of, you guys remember that movie Happiness? When the fuck did that come out? Todd Solondz, or however you pronounce that dude's last name. This reminded me of a movie like that, but with really intense, gross, like body horror. So it's almost kind of like a Cronenberg type of thing going on too. But then it's this kind of like weird, fucked up, like dark comedy, family drama type shit too. Like I said, it's kind of hard to explain. But like I said, if you're squeamish, particularly about menstrual stuff, you probably will not. I mean, this is the kind of movie that has a scene in it with, somebody pulling out a used tampon and sniffing it, and reaching up and like pulling out a baby and like throwing it in an oven and stuff like that. So it has that kind of like imagery. So if that's gonna bother you, then you probably are not gonna dig it. Now, the best thing about this movie, though, among many awesome things about this, is that the main character, Pauline, who is like a high school senior, she's played by AnnaLynne McCord. Now, I thought I had seen her before. I'm not super familiar with her work. She's been on a lot of TV. I think she's probably best known for being on Nip Tuck, and she was also on the late 2000s 90210 reboot. So she's usually known for playing these kind of really like vixen type, like the beautiful type women. And the fact that in this movie, she goes for it. She just uglies herself up, so she is unrecognizable. Because like I went later, because after I heard about the parts she usually plays, and I went and looked her up, and I'm like, holy crap, I wouldn't even like realize that was the same woman. This isn't even the kind of thing, how like in Hollywood movies sometimes they'll be like, oh, the homely girl, and then it's like they'll just pull her hair back in a ponytail and like put glasses on her and then just like call it a day, and they're just like, oh look, actually she's really beautiful. I'm like, yeah, duh, you can still clearly see that. Not so in this case. I'm not actually really even sure what they did to make her look like that, but I mean, a lot of it is in her physical performance. Like she's always kind of like slouching, and she's always like doing these weird, and they kind of put like zits and cold sores, and her hair's like always really greasy, and they put her in like these really gross like baggy, like unflattering clothes. But just everything about her is repellent, and yet she's still kind of likable. So like I said, this is kind of an amazing role for AnnaLynne McCord, because I mean, who would have thought, like, considering like what I looked through her resume and stuff like that, and like I said, she usually plays kind of a glamorous type of character, and so the fact that she had this in her and was able to pull off a character that was this repulsive, honestly, not just physically, but she does like repulsive things as well. But she's so off-putting, and yet she's still like really compelling, and she's still like kind of sympathetic in a way, even though she's clearly very, very mentally ill. But I kind of want to get into that a little bit too, because her character in this is like so fascinating to me. So she plays a character named Pauline, who's a high school senior. Now, she's a terrible student. She doesn't give a shit about school, yet she still has these kind of delusions of grandeur where she thinks that she's going to be a surgeon someday, even though I don't know if she's like flunking out, but she's like not She's like not even bothering doing schoolwork and stuff. So she lives in this family. Her mom, like I said, Phyllis, played by Traci Lords, is this really, really uptight, like very proper, you know, all Pauline needs like to get her on track is to like send her to cotillion classes and stuff like that. So it's kind of like a Southern, you know, kind of a very Southern conservative, like religious type of thing. Not over the top religious, but that is in there. So she plays that's the mom. And then the dad is just kind of like this, whatever. He's just like this spineless dude that whatever his wife says, that's, yeah, fine, whatever. I'm just like not even worried about it. And then Pauline also has a younger sister named Grace who has cystic fibrosis and is probably dying. You know what I mean? She doesn't seem like that, but, you know, they do kind of imply that might be where that's going. So the interesting thing, too, is that the family dynamic, obviously, Pauline and her mother do not get along because Phyllis is a very, very proper, like, pearls and, you know, like, little suit and everything like that. And she's just always very immaculate. And so she sees this slouching, greasy, zit-riddled daughter who is just fascinated by blood and gross shit and it's just like constantly disgusting. So it really like offends her sensibilities. So they're always kind of like butting heads. The interesting thing about Pauline's character, which you don't see a lot in this, because I've seen this movie compared to Carrie too, but it's not really the same thing. And it's really not the same thing as May either, because even though this is a girl that, you know, like I said, is an outsider, is repulsive to most people, is a very off-putting character, she doesn't, you know how like in May and in Carrie, like they were very aware of their outsider status and they, were really upset about it. You know, they got picked on and that would upset them. And it's just kind of like, so they were always kind of trying to fit in. Pauline has a thing where she doesn't really seem to care if she fits in or not. And it's almost kind of like she gets, I don't know if I'd say like she gets off on it, but she's very straightforward with her weirdness and her disgustingness. And she does not really seem all that bothered that people think that she's gross. You know what I mean? For an example of this is that she has decided that she's going to lose her virginity. And she's very matter of fact about this. Like she has decided that this is what she's going to do and this is how she's going to go about it. Also, because she's super fascinated by blood, she really wants to, the first time she has sex, she wants to have sex, she's on her period, right? So she chooses, like I said, very dispassionately, she chooses the lucky guy, right? Who's this guy named Adam, who's going out with this kind of like stereotypical blonde mean girl, like a popular girl at school. And so she essentially just like walks up to him, like when he's out in the, sitting on the bleachers or whatever, like talking to his friends, and is like, I've decided that I'm going to lose my virginity to you. And he's just kind of like, okay, like whatever. Like he doesn't like know how to react. And so she's just like, here's my number, call me. So she's just like she doesn't really seem to care, like I said, that other people think she's gross because, later on, there's like a scene in the locker room where the mean girls are like picking on her and saying like how disgusting she is. And it's like, oh, she looks like a lesbian and all this other kind of stuff. And she doesn't, it could be because they do show some scenes of her later where she's by herself and she seems to be like upset about stuff. But in the moment, she really doesn't seem all that bothered by, she just kind of like gives it back to them. Like, she doesn't get like all... That's kind of the interesting thing about her, like I said, and I think that that's where a lot of the comedy in this stems from, is that her character is just so repellent and so disgusting, but you can't help but kind of like her in a way because she's also like she's clearly very intelligent. She's kind of a smartass a little bit. It's like she's the kind of person that they're in like biology class or something and they're talking about sexually transmitted diseases and she just like very proudly raises her hand and said, can you get an STD from having sex with a dead person? And like everyone just like turns around and looks at her, but she doesn't seem, and I don't know if it's that it's hard to tell whether she comes across as like she's not aware of how weird she is, because she does really seem to be aware of how weird and gross she is, but it's almost kind of like she's daring people to call her out on it, or she almost kind of like wants to inflict it on other people. Like she kind of gets off on it. So it's that kind of thing too. Like I said, I'm making her sound like this monstrous character, which she is, but she's still like really interesting, and you still want to watch her, and she's still kind of funny because like the stuff she does is just so nasty, and it's just like fucking, I don't know, it's just like so hilarious. So yeah, so Adam, the boy who you don't think that he's actually gonna, because everybody at school, like I said, thinks she's just this, she thinks she's disgusting. So, but he does actually end up calling her because, you know, he's a teenage boy. So he's like, he's gonna take sex anywhere he can get it. So he takes her to a hotel room, and there's this like really uncomfortable scene where, because I forgot to mention too, that there's not only this kind of stuff going on, but they're also showing, and actually the first shot of the film is Pauline's dreams, or her fantasy life. Now, in her fantasies, she is, and this is just goes to show like how amazing this performance is, because the first time I watched this movie, it took me like an embarrassingly long time to realize that Pauline, like the disgusting girl, is the same as the woman that's in these visions that she has, like these sexual fantasies. Because in that one, I guess AnnaLynne McCord looks more like she would normally look, like, you know, when she's doing another like show or whatever. So they have her like very, very supermodel, and there's all these really kind of cool, I mean, visually very, very striking images of just like I said, fucked up shit where she is like sexually excited by blood and surgery and dismemberment and, you know, disembowelment. So she's like into that kind of shit, and like a little bit necrophilia too. They kind of hit it right at that. Mostly surgery types of like cutting people open and things like that. So she's kind of into that. So throughout the film, you kind of get a lot of these really awesome like visual sequences that are really like, that are lit almost like kind of this supermodel-y type of thing, but like this really harsh light. And then it's just these crazy like tableaus with like all these supermodel women, like with, you know, their viscera like hanging out, and there's just blood everywhere. So when she loses her virginity to this Adam kid, even though obviously it's just in a hotel room and it's just kind of this, you know, very, very workman-like situation, in her head, she's seeing it like this crazy, like, because they keep cutting back and forth to how she's seeing it. It's like there's just all this blood coming out in the bed, and she's like splashing around in it. It's just kind of like, so like I said, this is a very, very gory, very bloody kind of film. So I guess maybe that's like the way that she envisions the things that are happening. It's interesting because it shows like how, I guess, delusional she is, because maybe that's how she sees herself, or she sees everything. So maybe that's why she doesn't get all upset when like people make fun of her, because that's like her image of herself in her head. And like I said, she's clearly very delusional because she thinks she's going to grow up and be this great surgeon, even though she can't even be bothered to, you know, do her math homework or anything like that, and she's kind of like flunking out of school. So there's that kind of thing too. And I think there's kind of an undercurrent of, you know, which kind of becomes more clear as the movie goes on. And like I said, this is kind of where it shades into like a dark comedy, and it has like aspects of tragedy as well, is that Pauline's character, even though her and her mother are just constantly at odds all the time, and she's really like really mean to her mother, and her mother's really mean to her, and it's, you know, and there's kind of like a suggestion too that, you know, Traci Lords, the mother, that her mother was really cruel to her as well. And she, as the movie goes on, she becomes kind of a more subtly shaded character too, because you're wondering, she's worrying, it's like, am I repeating the cycle of abuse? Am I doing the same thing to her that, you know, my mother did to me? And all this, it's not physical abuse, but it's kind of like emotional abuse, where she's just constantly picking at her, and she's never good enough, and all this other kind of stuff. And, but there is a thing on Pauline's part too, where the reason that she wants to be this big masterful surgeon is, one, not only because she loves her sister more than anything, and her sister is dying of cystic fibrosis. So I think there's an underlying thing that Pauline thinks she's going to be the person that's going to, you know, discover something that's going to save her sister, but also because she wants to impress her mother. She finally wants her mother's approval. So even though it seems on the surface that she hates her mother, she's like constantly trying to get approval from her. And I think that's kind of like the depth of what their relationship is, which, as I said, it's, as the movie goes on, becomes a more and more a big part of the story. So as it goes on, it gets to a point, Pauline ends up getting expelled from school because after one of the mean girls that was Adam's girlfriend finds out that Adam slept with Pauline, and was really like grossed out because, like I said, she said, hey, why don't you go down on me? And he does, but it's like, and then she had her period and he was like really grossed out, which, like, I don't know, that just made me laugh. But that kind of stuff in movies always cracks me up. I don't know. But yeah, so that made me laugh. So he was like disgusted, and then the girlfriend found out about it. So the girlfriend and her other friend, I guess they go and like spray paint shit, like spray paint like horror and stuff like that all over Pauline's house, like the family house. And then Pauline goes into school and basically like beats up one of the girls, like slams her head into a locker and like breaks her nose or something like that. So Pauline ends up getting expelled. Now, at this point, like I said, up until now, Phyllis, the mom, she's been, you know, because it seems too, another thing that's kind of tragic about this is that Pauline, as, you know, repellent as she is, as kind of like standoffish as she is, she's always very snarky and things like that. But she does seem to be like asking for help. She knows that something is the matter with her, but it seems like everyone's kind of dismissing it or minimizing it. So she does seem like in a lot of ways she's kind of crying out for help, even though she's being like real sarcastic about it. It's funny because like the parents, you know, she has a conversation with her mom. And her mom's like, you know, we're not made of money and we can't afford to send you to a psychiatrist. So they had been sending her to this like counselor at the church who was like a priest, who's played by John Waters, like I said. And obviously, Pauline is really not getting anything out of this and basically just spends the whole sessions just like denigrating him because she's not really sure she believes in God or not. And she thinks he's not licensed. And, you know, so she does really seem to know that that there's something severely the matter with her and that she needs help. But, you know, she's not really getting the help that she needs. And like I said, it's not really entirely her family's fault because they don't seem to realize how drastic and how, you know, how awful her mental illness is and how serious it is. But finally, at some point, after she gets expelled from school, the mom and dad, they finally come to this decision. They're like, look, we're going to suck it up and we're going to get you like to a real psychiatrist. Will that make you feel better? Because it's like, you know, we really want to do something for you. However, before that happens, there's kind of like a thing where Pauline overhears her mother just like flipping out and just being like, I can't, she's like, I keep trying and trying with her. And it's, you know, and I can't, she says something like, I just can't love her, or it's so hard to love her. And Pauline like overhears this and gets like really upset and like starts crying and everything. So she does feel that her mother does not accept her the way she is or does not really love her. And this maybe is like stemming, you know, obviously feeding into her problem. And then that kind of leads to the very terrible conclusion of the movie, which I don't necessarily think I want to spoil because I think, although if you've seen the movie, you can pretty much guess where it's going because it's kind of like leading up to that. It's not so much like, ooh, twist or anything like that, because it is just kind of like, the whole thing is kind of like watching her, you know, get kind of crazier and crazier. And you know that it's kind of leading to this inevitable conclusion because it keeps getting brought up. So you're almost kind of like waiting for the next shoe to drop. It's like, oh man, this is going to be bad when this happens because everything's kind of leading to that. But I don't think I'm necessarily going to spoil it because, like I said, even though this movie came out in 2012, I feel like I just don't feel like a lot of people talk about it, and that's like a shame. As I said, I hadn't even heard of it until I came across it on a list, and I was like, oh, that sounds kind of good. And then like I saw all the, you know, all the cameos, all the people that were in it. I'm like, holy shit, how did I miss this one? So I definitely went and watched it, and it was just like, I was not disappointed. It's just really, it's a really good movie. Like I said, it has a lot of horror elements. It's very gory. It's very gross. You know, like I said, a lot of menstrual stuff, a lot of like abortion stuff, a lot of, you know, stuff like that. So like kind of squicky sort of stuff, a lot of surgery, you know, evisceration, people taking, you know, organs out and stuff like that. So there's all that kind of stuff. And it has like a really done in a really like artistic sort of way, like I said. So it's almost kind of like Cronenberg. It's almost like Brandon Cronenberg now that I want to, because it's kind of reminded me of like some of Brandon Cronenberg stuff too. But where it's just kind of like this, it's like beautiful but like grotesque. You know what I mean? But then, like, the rest of it is almost kind of like a suburban black comedy, but with, like, tragedy kind of swirled around underneath it that gets, like, more and more tragic at the end. But yeah, it's just, this is really, really worth watching. If anything that I said sounds like something that would be your cup of tea, then I would definitely recommend this one. I feel like it's underseen, it doesn't get talked about enough, and it's really, really good. Like I said, it's on... If you have Amazon Prime, at least as of this recording, it's on there for free. Like I said, there's on there to rent for a couple $1 too, but I'm pretty sure it's the same, so don't worry about it. So you can watch it for free, or if you don't have Amazon Prime, you can watch it for free on Tubi. I would also recommend his other movie, this director's other movie, Suburban Gothic, which came out in 2014. Like I said, I kind of feel like I don't remember that one being as gory or as like grotesque or like arty as this one, but it was still like really fun. It's like kind of a black comedy as well, a horror comedy. And like I said, he made another one called Trashfire, which I haven't seen yet, but I have actually heard a lot of good stuff about that, so I'm going to put that on my list as well, and I'll probably eventually end up reviewing it. I'll probably do Suburban Gothic too, now that I'm thinking about it, because I really wouldn't mind watching that one again. But yeah, so it's called Excision, and go watch it, and if you've seen it, let me know what you thought about it in the comments, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye.